Reincarnated with an analysis system. Chapter 31 to 40. Chapter 31 The City of Narvik. The city of Narvik is home to the three most dominant creatures: vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. And today was the day they were about to host a meeting like they always do. Since the city was a home for three species, they came up with a government, where each species will have a representative to be added to the council that rules over the whole city. Vlad, one of the strongest for the vampire, was a part of the council, while the vampires under him were known as families possess blazing red eyes. For the werewolves was Pimo, another strong candidate for the council. He also had his own pack where he was the alpha. And lastly was the ghost, who was represented by Gudan, an expert ghost who has won over his people with his intelligence and leadership. The ghosts have different shapes, some have humanoid shapes while others could take the shape of a cone, or sometimes shapeless. Adding to that, depending on the clan these ghosts serve under, the color of the flames on their head differs. And as expected, some strong candidates were wanting to take the role of the leading council members at any cost. Every 4 years, each candidate that wants to be in the council goes through a battle royal tournament to decide the ruler. And this had been going on for years, and no one has been able to take the spot of the current council members, hence political corruption started to make its way in. News of leaders of packs and families dying began to spread around, causing panic and distrust amongst the other packs and families. So, the council decided to have a meeting after the news was starting to cause havoc amongst the people. Each representative sat at the round table with at most 3 bodyguards standing behind them. Gudang cleared his throat. "I'm glad you all could make it. I want to believe you know why this meeting was put forth," he uttered. Gudang had a humanoid shape and wore a white Japanese outfit with his arm resting on the band as he spoke. "Yeah, some asshole thought it would be funny to kill one of my most profit-making werewolves," Pimo yelled before slamming his hand on the table. "Control yourself, Pimo, don't act so vulgar on the table," Vlad uttered in a calm voice. Pimo grunted. "Perhaps you know something that I don't. 'Cause if you don't, then don't tell me to shut up." "Well, do you?" he asked aggressively. "Even if I did, what? You think I'd tell you? I came up with most of the ideas, joining cities together, the trade market, even security," Vlad expressed calmly. "What point are you trying to make, Vlad?" Gudang asked with a bit of tension. Vlad sighed. "I'm saying you all are useless on the council. Honestly, the only thing you do is gain money of the people," he asserted. "Why you little?" Pimo yelled in anger. Vlad just casually stood up from his chair and dusted the suit he was wearing. The suit was an official way of dressing for members of the council anytime a meeting was being held. "If a member of my family is involved in this, I can assure you that I will see to it they get punished." After uttering those words, Vlad walked out of the room when the remaining 3 vampires followed behind him. The rest of the council just sat there confused and angered at the boldness Vlad put up before he stood up from his chair and walked out on them. "Brother, are you sure it was a good choice to walk away like that?" Sieg asked, walking behind Vlad while looking around to make sure no one was lurking around. "Relax, if push comes to shove we have a political war," Vlad replied before stepping into his white stylishly designed carriage with Seg following after him. They made their way back to their district, the Red District. It was a town home to different vampires, ghosts, and a few werewolves. And Vlad was the leader of that district and commonly called a duke because he was also part of the council ruling over the remaining towns and villages. Vlad arrived at his huge mansion, located in the Red District. One of the vampires opened the gate to the vast land before Vlad's carriage rode in. The whole place was so huge, even if there were 15 more mansions built in the area, they'd still be enough space to fight a war. A huge fountain with 4 white angelic statues surrounded it with water pouring from their mouths which added to the design. All around were maids, each one focusing on a particular task. The wide field that was roaming with horses and servants and the quiet surrounding was something any rich man would dream of having. But Vlad was no man, he was the leader of all vampires. He was stronger, faster, and smarter than the rest. Vlad got down from his carriage and looked out the window to the left side of the mansion and smiled. He walked toward the door but paused before turning the knob. "Sieg," he called out. "Yes, sire," Seg responded. "I need you to go to the Kilo district and deliver a message to Giggs," Vlad voiced out. "What would you like me to convey to him?" Seg asked. "Tell him I want to see him tomorrow morning, and not a second past noon," Vlad ordered. "Understood, sire, I'll do so," Sieg responded with his head bowed. He turned to the vampire beside him. "Get me a horse, I'm moving out." Once Vlad saw that Sieg was moving out, he smiled and opened the door to his mansion. As soon as he opened the door, he tilted his head to the side to dodge the lightning-fast shoe that was charging his way. The shoe shattered the door into pieces, leaving nothing behind Vlad but rubles of the broken door. Vlad sighed and looked up the long stairs that were covered in a red shining rug. He could see his daughter, Elsa, standing at the top of the stairs with an angry expression. Elsa was panting as she stood at the top with one heel on her leg. She had a long red beautiful dress on, with a red flower resting at the side of her hair. "Father," she yelled, "what the devil were you thinking setting up an engagement with Gidses?" Chapter 32 Will it begin? A political war. It was a beautiful morning in Narvik City, and Elsa, the daughter of Vlad, was still fast asleep in bed. The sounds of maids murmuring to themselves as they worked were echoed around the whole estate. The mansion was filled with working house help, and this was a normal morning routine. It was always busy. 247. Knock knock. Elsa immediately placed the pillow on her face when she heard someone knocking on her door. Sleeping is one of the things she loves taking part in. Miss Elsa, it's time for breakfast. A masculine voice came from the other side of the door alongside continuous banging of the door. Elsa sat upright on the bed when she could no longer sleep from the noise. Her hair was scattered around her face from the careless way she slept. Elsa yawned as she stretched her body. It's morning already, she uttered. Resting beside her was a brown drawer, and on top of it was a small purple glass plate with tiny magic crystals around its edges. She rested her hand on the plate and the door to her room instantly made a click sound, indicating it was unlocked. A man with long black hair and red eyes walked into the room with a food tray in his hand as he moved closer to Elsa. He wore a butler black outfit that added to his masculine charm. His handsome-looking face was hard to look past. He was the exact replica of a Riz master. Good morning, milady, I hope you slept well, the butler asked. He placed the food tray on the bed before walking over to the window to open the curtain for light to brighten the room. Elsa looked at the food and noticed the large number of vegetables that was on her plate. Sebastian, she called out with a straight face. Yes, milady, Sebastian answered. Why are there so many veggies in my food? Even after making it clear countless times that I hate veggies, Elsa voiced out, trying to hold in the need to yell. Sebastian looked at her for a while and smiled. Your brother asked me to do this, I just merely did as he asked, he responded. Damn it, Christian, Elsa grunted. She sighed and picked up the fork and knife before she started eating. Sebastian cleaned the room and was about to head out when he remembered something. Oh milady, I forgot to inform you, he hinted. Is that so? Well, get on with it then, I want to freshen up, Elsa uttered. She got down from the bed and headed to the huge standing mirror in her room. She was still in her nightdress, but her beauty remained the same. Sebastian smiled again. Sir Vlad told me to inform you that Lord Giggs will be coming to visit today with his son, he reported and walked out of the room. As soon as she heard the news, Elsa froze up as she looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes widened in shock from what she heard. At the balcony in Vlad's mansion, Giggs, the leader of the Black Bull's vampire family, was seated at the small table. He was a noble of a small town in Nervek. His family was known for securing the city with utmost security from intruders and the like. His appearance sometimes deceives people. He was fat and not masculine in any way, but the ultimate skill he holds is powerful enough to rival Vlad. Lord Giggs, it's a pleasure to meet you, sorry for the wait, Vlad voiced out as he walked into the balcony with two maids following behind him. Duke, you sure took your time, I was starting to think you wanted me to wait on purpose. Giggs laughed. Come now, I am as humble as I am kind, Vlad said and sat down on the chair with a calm look on his face. He immediately noticed the black huge-looking man dressed in a uniform standing beside Giggs. Oh, are you wondering who he is? Yeah, he joined my family yesterday, found him at the coin village completely buried in dirt, so I took him in, Giggs explained. I see, isn't this the fourth time this week you've done this? Vlad asked. The world is a scary place, Duke, the least I can do is save those who can be saved, don't you agree? Giggs smiled before grabbing the wine on the table and gulping it down. Vlad smiled. I'm sure you know why I called you here, he said with his hand resting on the chair armrest. Giggs's eyes suddenly held so much seriousness. So it's true. I did hear rumors about it, but I just thought they were rumors. I can assure you, they are not. Someone is trying to start a political war, and if this person succeeds, it could lead to dispute amongst our races, Vlad hinted. A few weeks ago, 3 dead vampires were found in a workshop at Central Garden, their hearts and eyes completely gouged out, and this wasn't the only place. V2 Square, Sound Pill, Has Round, all these places had dead vampire reports. Giggs was shocked. He never knew it was that bad. To begin with, he leaned forward and whispered to Vlad, do you think it was the other werewolves doing this? He asked. Vlad sighed. I thought that too, but then I saw this. He brought out a small handkerchief and opened it up from Giggs to see. Giggs looked closer and saw a medium-sized medal inside. It had blue glowing writings on it. It's a meta rock, Giggs voiced out. Exactly, I can't say for certain that the werewolves or ghosts aren't involved in this, but I do know one thing. This was found not once but 3 times at the scene of the crime, and I only know one family capable of making medals like this with writings, Vlad mentioned as he rested his back on the chair. Giggs's eyes widened as soon as he figured it out. You mean, the Hakiku family? He asked with shock written all over his face. Chapter 33 Milady, we are under attack. Exactly, the Hakiku family are the only ones with the unique skill to forge weapons like this, Vlad stated. Giggs paused and sighed before resting his back on the chair. So what now? What do you think they are after? He asked. Vlad folded the handkerchief back and gave one of the maids to take it back inside before responding. I don't know, it's safe to say, their goal reaches far more than just having fun. Well, knowing this, I could help strengthen securities around the town just to be on the safe side, Giggs offered. That would be most appreciated, Vlad thanked. They suddenly heard the footsteps and neighs of horses moving toward the mansion. Giggs stood up and went to check. With a smile on his face, he turned and looked at Vlad. My son has arrived, shall we go, Duke Vlad, he uttered with a smile. Luke, the first son of Giggs, got down from the carriage with a woman wearing a white uniform standing beside him. She had blue ponytail hair and green eyes, with a white uniform that perfectly fitted on her body. Luke got down from the carriage and took the mansion in. It hasn't changed a bit over the years, he muttered. He and his assistant walked towards the door, and standing at the entrance was Giggs, who was patiently waiting for him. Father, Luke uttered. He walked up to Giggs and gave him a quick hug before pulling away. His eyes were roaming about before he faced his father back. Father, where is she? I don't see her anywhere, he asked curiously. Giggs laughed. Don't be so impatient, my boy, she's waiting for you inside, come on, he said, and walked into the mansion. Taking a deep breath and setting his clothes, Luke walked in after his father. The inside caught his eyes as he found himself looking around. This way, my son, Giggs led. All right, Luke responded. Following his father, he walked straight to the dining room where Vlad and his two children, Urza and Christian, were seated. As soon as he spotted Urza, a smile hit his lips. He was staring at her so hard that he didn't hear when his father was calling for him. Luke, Giggs yelled. Yes, father. Luke immediately snapped out of it and replied to his father. I sure hope you haven't forgotten the Duke of this town, Duke Vlad the Warlord, Giggs asked. Luke smiled in response to the question. Of course not, it is an honor to stand before you, he said. The honor is all mine, do have your seat, Vlad said calmly. Giggs and Luke sat down on the chair and they began dining. After they were done and the maids were bringing in dessert, Vlad asked a question. Luke, are you prepared for the engagement? Vlad asked. Urza chopped on her food from the surprise as she started coughing as soon as Vlad asked the question. She picked up a glass of water and began gulping it down. Luke had a smile on his face when he heard the question. Of course, I am your dukeship, he replied. Dukeship, Christian muttered to himself as he tried to hold down his laughter. Great, exactly what I needed to hear. The engagement will be held in 2 days. What? Urza interrupted Vlad as she yelled, standing up from her chair and slamming her hands on the dining table. Father, this is not right. Do I not get a say in this? Urza yelled. Luke stood up from this chair too. Urza, are you perhaps opposed to our engagement? He asked with a bit of sadness in his voice. Urza looked to the side. I need to use the restroom, she uttered and ran up the stairs to her room. Giggs and Luke were both shocked, looking at Vlad to see if he could explain what was going on. Vlad just grabbed his wine. She's probably going through puberty, he uttered before sipping his wine. ... Urza ran into her room and slammed the door before falling flat on her bed. God, I hate this house, she yelled. She slowly lifted her head from the bed to look outside the window to see a bird pecking on the glass. Urza stood up and opened the window, but the bird just ended up flying away. She groaned and rested her head on the window. Engagement. I'm pretty sure I can take him one-on-one. I don't want to marry someone weaker than me, she muttered to herself. She then noticed that Luke and his father were boarding their carriers to leave for their home. No, wait, Urza shouted. She ran out of the room and down the stairs till she got downstairs, but she was already too late. Vlad, Giggs, and Luke had already gone. Urza sighed and was about to go back inside when she spotted Sebastian watering the garden. A smile hit her face as she called out, Sebastian, she yelled, waving at him to come over. With Sebastian's help, Urza took another carrier and rode after Giggs and her father to see if she could catch up. Sebastian was seated beside Urza in his usual butler uniform, looking left and right continuously. Are you okay, Sebastian? Urza asked when she noticed his movements. Sebastian sighed. Leaving the mansion was not a good idea, milady. I don't think your father would be happy about this, he said. Urza diverted her eyes with her hands tucked as she looked outside through the window. It's not like I'm going somewhere else, I'm just going to meet him, she said. The place went awkwardly quiet for a while, until Urza uttered, Sebastian, what is that? She asked. Is that a Psyhyper? She asked. Psyhyper. Sebastian moved closer to look and saw something like a wolf charging toward their carrier. Look out, he yelled, pushing Urza's face on the chair. The huge wolf slammed against the carrier and almost knocked it off balance, but the rider was quick to increase the horse's speed. Urza stood up from the chair, panting heavily from the way Sebastian held her face on the chair. Sebastian, were those? She muttered. Sebastian grunted, damn it, folding his hand sleeves up. Milady, we are under attack. Whatever you do, don't move an inch from where you are, he said with a serious look on his face. Following the carrier from behind were giant wolves, numbered 4, chasing down the carrier with incredible speed, backing them up. Chapter 34 Urza in the Forest of Witches. Sebastian moved toward the entrance of the carrier and peeked outside to see the giant wolves chasing them down. He pulled his hand back in and looked at Urza, who was already peeping from the other side. Milady, Sebastian shouted. Urza immediately pulled her head back in. Werewolves, those are werewolves, she uttered. Yes, milady, do not come out of this carriage no matter what, Sebastian said with a serious look as he began pulling one of his right gloves. You know very well I can't do that, Urza yelled, yanking up from the chair only to fall back down from the way the carrier was shaking. Sebastian sighed. Please, milady, if not for anything, at least think about how your father would feel if something were to happen to you, he said calmly. Urza puffed her mouth and folded her arm with her back resting on the wall. Fine, I won't interfere, she reluctantly agreed. Thank you, Sebastian voiced. With a stern look, he moved almost all his body outside the carrier while using his left hand to hold the carrier so he wouldn't fall. Stretching out his right hand, he observed the 4 huge wolves charging toward the carrier. The brown wolf that was in front of the pack suddenly sensed something dangerous coming, so it leapt out of the way. As soon as its legs left the ground, multiple black metal-shaped spears erected from the ground and caught them off guard. 3 of the wolves managed to evade the attacks, but one wasn't so lucky. The metal stabbed him in a lot of different places. It fell to the ground, whinnying from the immense pain it was feeling before it slowly began to turn back into a male human. The other wolves could see the horrific way he looked. His insides were all over the floor and most of his body parts had separated. The brown wolf moved closer to its dead comrade. He can't possibly heal from that, he's dead, it uttered. One of the wolves howled to the sky, which is a normal trait the werewolves grew accustomed to when they are sad. The brown wolf grunted, let's go, it yelled. They began chasing down the carrier, and this time they were moving twice the speed, and Sebastian could tell. They're really persistent, he thought to himself. He placed one of his legs on the moving ground after placing a metal plate underneath. Sebastian did the same thing with his other leg. This allowed him to use the metal as a skating board while the carrier was speeding. Be careful, Sebastian, Urza voiced out, crawling on over to his side on the couch. Move back, milady, you are too close, Sebastian asserted. Urza sighed and moved back to the extreme end. Are you happy now? She asked sarcastically. Yes, he replied before facing his attention back at the wolves. Urza rested her jaw on her hand as she stared out the window, pouting. She could see lots of deer hugs feeding as the carrier raced by. What's his deal? It's not like I can't defend myself if I need to, she muttered to herself. While she was looking outside the mirror, she noticed a human-shaped shadow running beside the carrier. She wasn't sure what it was, so she peeked outside to check, but as soon as her head went out the window, the human chasing the carrier transformed into a huge black wolf and grabbed her hand with its mouth. Screaming, Urza struggled to pull her hand from its mouth. Let go off me, she yelled. Damn it, I said let go, Urza voiced out aggressively, and a symbol suddenly appeared on her left eye, causing the wolf to get sluggish. But it didn't let go. Using the last of its strength, the werewolf pulled Urza out of the carrier and sent her flying a far distance before it collapsed on the ground. Urza screamed. Her body was speeding through the air as if she were flying. She could see the whole ground in a bird-eye view as she went falling into the forests. Okay, chill, Urza yelled in her mind as she tried to calm herself down. She took a deep breath and stretched out her hand below her. And a blue magic circle materialized in front of her hand before the wind blew out of it, making her land safely on the ground. Once she was on the ground, she gave out a reliving sigh as she began looking around to tell where she was. Where am I? Urza questioned. She had never left her father's district before. This is the first time she had gotten to where she was. Urza began walking around for a bit, observing everything around her from the trees to the tiny lakes. Once she had filled her curiosity, she sat down beside the lakes to rest. I'm really lost, ain't I? She uttered. Oh, that's right, Urza suddenly yelled. She stood up from the ground and took a deep breath. The same magic symbol appeared in her eyes again. It was red and had the symbol of a bird's wings with nobody. Once the symbol appeared in her eyes, she smiled. See, I knew I could use it. Now I just have to read where I am, analyze, she voiced out. Her right eye glowed before multiple pieces of information appeared in her sight of vision instantly. Increment location, Forest of Witches. Total of 67,980 trees, 424 herb plants, 600 updating fruits, an estimated home to 15,000 monsters increment. Forest of Witches. I've never heard of that place before, Urza said to herself. With a sigh, she turned her back to walk away only to hear a voice shouting. Wow, wait, don't try, Sato yelled as he fell from the cliff and landed right in front of Urza. I know I can't feel pain, but I can tell I took some damage from that, Sato grunted. Less than answer, damage taken, it's a total of 98%, activating instant heal. Greater than. Sato's body began to glow with his injuries closing up while he laid on the floor. That feels better. Rising his head up, he noticed she couldn't see anything, but he could feel his lip rubbing into something soft and smooth. What's this? Sato questioned, grabbing onto the eggs to see that a material was covering his head. Flipping open the material, he immediately noticed he had just flipped up Urza's skirt and he could see a clear view of her panties. Panties. Sato panicked and immediately moved back after seeing the flustered expression on Urza's face. Hey there, he uttered nervously. I know this looks a little. You pervert, Urza shouted with a death stare, kicking Sato in the neck with a loud boom following right after as Sato landed in the lake. Chapter 35 Message from the Demon King Jira. Before Sato and Urza's encounter. The village of Avalon, which was given its name by Sato, was now growing into a town. Ever since Sato helped the beast people make a home at Rizaha, they have been sending all kinds of help. Like beast warriors to help with the security, a spider beast that helped the village in sewing numerous clothing even for Sato and the rest of the elves. Even secretly linking Sato to a marché, Flow, he resides in the kingdom of Tuk and is obsessed with the healing potion that Sato was producing. The once small village now had slightly more beautiful homes, a variety of different crops, an AV stone that helps towns and villages make deals with higher businessmen. Sato was able to accomplish all this in a span of 1 month, making his village one of the biggest villages able to rival a town. Even though he had only elves and some beast people living in the village, it was still growing at a rapid pace. One fine and early morning, when the sun was out and the breeze was calm, Sato, the lord of the unnamed village of Rizaha, received a message from the king. Elena stood in front of Sato and handed the letter to him. She wore a black coat that covered her entire body but left a little opening to show her stomach. Standing beside Sato were Devanshi and Yuri. While Yuri was wearing a black alluring kimono with a red flower on her hair, Devanshi was wearing tight black pants, where one of the legs was short to her thighs like her high socks, a red two-layer belt dangling around her waist which was added with a short black jacket crop top that was zipped halfway to cover the lower part of her breast and complemented with a white long coat that fell behind her. Zeno, wearing a black military-style outfit with a red scarf around his neck, took the paper from Elena and began to open it. When did this come in? He asked as he slowly removed the magic seal from the paper which brought out a holographic image of a message. Elena replied by saying, "Just today, Rishio told me a demon from the demon capital came to deliver it." "I see," Sato muttered. Devanshi moved closer to Zeno. "What does the message say? Come on, I'm curious," she uttered excitedly, rubbing her breast against his right arm carelessly. Sato sighed, hiding his flustered face while he strongly focused on the information in front of him. Increment dik hun, jira kakik puro enk bung. Hain raya jimoj quinoa fim fik. Gano. Fanano suan lati wink shiji increment. The message came out like this to Yuri and Elena who tried to read it. But, both Sato and Daibanji both have a magical sense which basically helps them interpret any and all languages. Increment: I am the king of Fiora Kingdom, Demon Lord Jira. I want to give a warning, your village has not been registered under my kingdom to be given the authority of a name or a place. Report to the demon capital before the bed of the first week or I will consider this a crime and it will come with consequences. Increment. Sato read out loud. He folded the paper back and handed it over to Elena before looking at the far end of the village. "So master, what are you going to do?" Devanshi asked. "We have been doing a lot of trading lately, it's only normal the king would notice," Yuri added. Sato faced Yuri. "Yuri, I need you to help me search the area and see if it's possible any demons are still lurking around," he requested. "Are you afraid that they are spying?" Yuri asked. "Yes, I am," Sato responded. "I have no doubt in my mind, something must have piqued his interest, the message was more of a threat than information," he said. Yuri smiled. "As you wish then, I'll get on with it," she uttered and instantly disappeared out of sight. Once she was gone, Zeno turned to Elena, "The squad building the bridge over the river, tell them to put it on hold," he ordered. Elena was a bit concerned by the thought. She wanted to leave but turned back to ask, "Lord Sato, what about the people who work day in and night building it to where it has gotten to?" she asked. Sato smiled back in response, "Relax, it's only on hold for now. If I'm right then the Demon King was probably drawn in by the rapid growth of our little village, so we need to stop some things for now," he explained calmly while patting her head. With a beet red face, Elena bowed her head. "I'll be on my way then my lord," she said before speeding away. With a sigh, Sato turned to Devanshi who already had an extremely excited look on her face as she awaited her tasks. Why is she so excited? Sato thought to himself with an awkward chuckle. Devank. Hi, Devanshi responded before he could even finish calling her name. Sato sighed again. "Please help supervise the junior hunters, hunting deer hugs is still quite exhausting," he requested. "Of course, I'll be back before you can even finish the word dragon." Devanshi smiled as she walked away. "She's way too lively." Looking at the sun, Sato uttered, "Helix, how far is the demon capital from here?" Less than answer, "It will take a total of 2 days to arrive at the demon capital on horseback, and days on foot greater than. 2 days on. I guess that could work, but with all these vampires roaming about lately it might prove to be a problem later." Less than notice, 4 main villages in the area have been overtaken by vampires over the last few weeks. Korn, Dosha, Sandland. These are the villages that have fallen victim to their attacks. Greater than. What are they up to though? I know they wanted the beast people but now that they are in hiding, are they trying to get other races involved to start some kind of war? Sato muttered to himself. Less than I have come up with multiple possibilities that could lead to the reason for recent vampire raids. Greater than. No, I don't need that, I'll ask directly from the source, Sato said. Looking at his palm, a white mask with the drawing of a Grim Reaper appeared in his hand. Helix, he called out, placing the mask on his face as he and slowly levitated from the ground. Pinpoint the villages, I'd like to pay them a visit. Less than request confirmed. Greater than. Chapter 36 The Invasion of the Village Kayan. Please let me go, the cat girl cried out as the vampire pushed her out of the hut with brute force. Shut your mouth, the vampire yelled, slapping the cat girl on the face which made her fall to the ground with tears rolling down her cheeks. The small village was called Kayan, and was home to a small group of cat people but they were suddenly invaded by vampires and had no way to defend themselves. The vampires broke into their homes and took most of the cat men by force and locked them up in the wagon while surrounding the females at a spot for execution and slavery. Sato, who was hovering above the village, witnessed everything and the only thing he could feel was disgust. No one was able to sense his presence because of the magic cloak he placed around himself. Looking down at the way the vampires were bringing the woman out of their homes and tossing them to the ground was slowly starting to piss him off. Helix, can you tell how the cats are doing? Sato asked. Less than request confirmed. Answer, their lives are not in any danger at the moment, but continuous violence can lead to several injuries greater than. I see. Sato muttered, attacking other villages is not something I can overlook. If Duke Vlad is involved, I'm going to have to confront him at some point. Although, I don't think I have the power to question what he does, but still, if my plan is to succeed, I'll need as much help as I can get, and I'm not stopping over some freaking vampires. Sato landed right in front of the cat girls. He grabbed one of the vampires and crushed his fist before pushing him away. As soon as the rest of the vampires heard his cry, they all gathered around the scene to see Sato standing in between them and the cat girls. Ah, that son of a bitch broke my hand. The vampire yelled, crawling away from Sato with his butt. Shit, I tried to hold back as much as possible, Sato thought to himself as he stared at the vampire in his face mask. Looking behind him, he could see how the cat girls were shaking in fear from the trauma they were feeling. Sato slowly looked at them. Are you okay? He asked. They didn't respond. Instead, they moved closer to one another with so much fear written on their faces. Sighing, Sato switched his attention back to the vampire. There's no way they can answer my questions in this state. Helix, find where the vampires are keeping the male cats. He asserted. Less than request confirmed greater than. Oi, quit your whining and get up, you're a vampire, aren't you? Geez, they always gotta team me up with the losers. A huge vampire with a gained axe in his hands walked forward with a smirk on his face. In his other hand was a male cat being dragged on the floor by the vampire. Sato held his frustration in and kept his cool. Who are you? Your entrance was quite amusing. Not many people can crush a vampire's wrist like it's nothing. The vampire said with a grin. I'm just a traveler. I saw a bunch of people in trouble and I'm simply here to help them out of it. Sato replied, making sure the mask he was wearing was firm on his face. Looking around, he could see that behind the buildings and trees the vampires were trying to surround him, but he didn't pay attention to it. The huge vampire threw the male cat on the ground. You stopped your traveling just to save these pathetic creatures. Now that's just a waste of time. This dude is really pissing me off. Sato said to himself, what are vampires doing out here? Shouldn't you guys be a Tamarin with your duke? He asked. The vampire immediately glared at him, you son of a b. Sir Fiend, the cats ran away from their chamber. A young vampire yelled as he ran toward Fiend. Fiend, who had been communicating with Sato, looked back to see one of his vampires panting. What's wrong? He asked. Sir, they escaped, all of them. One of the males started acting strange, so we opened the prison, but then, they all run away. The male cat and the cat girls couldn't help but give a reliving smile when they heard the news. Less than notice, male cats found, they seem to be heading down to the open field at full speed greater than. I see, they are probably hiding from the vampires chasing them. Sato thought to himself. Meanwhile, Gen had issued most of the vampires to head into the forest and search for their escaped prisoners. Once his men were gone, leaving only 3 of his vampires to stay behind, Gen looked at Sato with a bit of anger on his face. Is this your doing? Gen asked Sato. Sato didn't give a response, which gave Gen the idea that Sato was trying to act cocky with him. He scoffed before turning his back. Make sure you rip him apart. Gen ordered his vampires before walking away. The 3 vampires began closing in on Sato, who still had a calm composure even with the 3 vampires walking toward him. Killing them is an option, but there's so much I want to ask. The last vampire we caught died before we even got a chance to ask any questions. Safe to say vampires' loyalty comes first. Sato muttered in his mind. Alright then, if that's the case, Sato said with a smile. He stretched his hand to the side, causing a rush of dark mist to come out from it. Once the mist stopped, a slightly human-shaped slime appeared. It had a green and blue mix of color all over. Sato patted the head of the slime. Protect then, okay. Fu. The slime responded. Thanks, Fu, Sato said before he began approaching the vampires with no fear written on his face. Now, how do I fight you without killing you in the process? Seriously, this is becoming a huge pain in the butt. Chapter 37 Invasion of the Village Kaien 2. One of the vampires whooshed toward Sato with a longsword in his hands. The vampire struck his sword at Sato but was surprised when Sato vanished away from his sight and appeared behind him. With a smile, Sato struck the back of the vampire with the side of his hand, which rendered the vampire unconscious. The remaining 2 vampires immediately stopped their advance after seeing one of their own falls fast to Sato. He's fast, one of the vampires said, turning to look at his partner in disbelief. Sato dusted his palm and began to approach them. Just you 2 let's get this over with. He uttered. He noticed one of the cat boys at the corner, shaking in fear as he watched Sato fight the vampires. Dude, Sato called out to the catboy. The catboy immediately responded with a squeak, moving closer to the building behind him. Listen, you should lead your females somewhere safe. Don't worry, I won't let the vampires through. Just go, cowarding won't fix anything. Sato gave his word. Scoffing, the vampire stretched out his hand aimed at Sato. Don't get cocky. He yelled. A spiraling fireball appeared in front of his hands. He flicked his finger, and the fireballs charged toward Sato. Sato sighed. At least try to put up a fight. He stretched his arm and a rush of black flames charged out of his hand and completely covered the fireballs. The vampire that cast the fireballs fell to the ground in fear when the black flames almost burnt him whole. Seeing this, the catboy stood to his feet with a bit more confidence and sprinted over to where the females were. One by one he took them to their feet with the help of Sato's Chelly slime, who helped escort them away from the village. Do you realize who you are messing with? The vampire yelled. We are from the Hikaku family, the third strongest family in all of Tamarin. Oh, is that so? Sato uttered with a foreshadowed expression on his face as he slowly walked toward them. See, normally, I hate violence and I try to avoid it as much as possible, but a long range of magic energy spread out of Sato's body that caused everything in his path to blow away. Even I know when jerks need to be punished. Stay back. The vampires panicked, throwing different fire spells at Sato that just ended up vanishing in thin air. Sato was almost close to the vampires when another vampire showed up from under the earth. It sunk up and grabbed Sato's leg before pulling Sato's legs into the ground all the way to his stomach, with the vampire went up, leaving Sato stuck halfway in the ground. The vampire immediately took to his heels as soon as he got to the surface. Come on, let's scram, he yelled, jumping very high to cover more distance. The remaining vampires followed without hesitation, even forgetting about the cat people and just fleeing for their lives. Sato sighed. I thought vampires were supposed to be strong, these guys are just cowards, he uttered. Using his skill less than dark mist greater than, Sato dematerialized his body into dust, and once he was out of the hole he materialized back into human form. Less than notice, vampires have their own ranking, none of the vampires you faced were above D rank. Greater than. For real, Sato yelled in his mind with a drop of sweat expression on his face before he sighed. He looked behind him to see that the cat people were not behind him anymore. I guess they escaped, he said with a smile. Helix, update on the whereabouts of the vampires and male cats that escaped from their cells. Less than. Request confirmed. Greater than. Less than. The male cat are currently heading west of here toward the hunting ground, and the vampires are right under their tails. Greater than. I see. Welp, I can catch up, Sato uttered. A massive amount of wind began to gather up around his feet. With a big boom, Sato whooshed to the front, leaving the ground crushed from how fast he moved. He was running so fast, the trees he passed were blown out by the force that followed his speed. In a matter of minutes, Sato caught up to the vampires and began attacking them at full speed without stopping his running. The vampire were confused, they didn't know what was dropping their comrades unconscious on the ground. Sato kept taking them out as he continued his advance. He took out every vampire he came across, leaving only Fiend, who blocked Sato's punch with his hand, but the force still sent him flying. With a smile on Sato's face, he continued running till he spotted the male cats trying to climb a small hill. Nice, I caught up to them, Sato muttered to himself. He wanted to make a quick stop when a squirrel blocked his path. He tried to make a sharp turn but just ended up smacking his foot on a tree, which made him lose his balance. He tumbled past the cat people and straight down the cliff, screaming his lungs out from how fast he was falling. Brother, did you see that? One of the male cats asked. He was holding a stick for defense against the vampires. Yes, I did, the male cat with white cat ears and a white tail uttered. He looked to be the oldest among all of them. Sighing, the red male cat added, Look, I say we talk another path. We are still in the forest of witches, the vampires are here, we should avoid the forest. Everyone looked at him with a bit of confusion and fear written on their faces. The cat tribe has always been secretive about their existence, they hardly leave their village, much less the forest of witches. Grunting, the white cat picked one of the youngest male and carried him, getting ready to place him on the cliff so they can continue their advance. You should really think about this. The red cat tried to convince them to take another route. We've gone this far already, turning back can prove to be. Pa. The white cat suddenly stopped when he heard a loud sound come from where Sato fell. He paused for a while, looking at all the faces of the cats. He sighed and carried the small kids and placed him back on the ground. Come on, let's find another place. Chapter 38 The Vampress and Lordship. Flashback end. Sato sat down on a small rock with his body soaked from top to bottom. He had a deadpan look on his face as he stared at Urza. Why are you looking at me like that? Urza asserted, with her arms tucked as she stood in front of Sato staring down at him. Sighing, Sato looked back at her. I get that I saw your panties and all, but let's be honest, it wasn't something worth getting angry for. If anything, you should be apologizing, you should be thanking me for low. Speak any longer and I'll roast you alive where you sit, Urza threatened, her eyes glowing red with the wing symbol, flashing as she put out a sadistic expression. Sato sighed again, a hot steam left his body which caused his dress to dry off almost instantly. Less than notice. The female in front of you is a vampire, caution is advised. Greater than. Yeah, I figured that out already, Sato muttered to himself. He stood up from the rock he was sitting on and turned his back on Urza. Hey, I still have some questions to ask you, Urza yelled. You're a vampire, aren't you? Sato hinted, slowly facing her with a smirk. Now, I wonder how you ended up on this side of the kingdom. With an irritated expression, Urza clenched her fist. Do you have any idea who I am? She asserted. No, I don't, and frankly, I don't wanna. I am the daughter of the vampire lord of the Trinity, Duke Vlad. Vlad, you're his daughter? Sato asked with a bit of shock in his tone. Oh, Urza muttered with a teasing grin, is that fear I sense? Well, it's expected, my father is the vampire lord after all. Shut up for a second. Sato yelled, grabbing Urza's arm and pulling her close with force which left her surprised. Tell me, does your father have anything to do with the recent vampire attacks happening in the witch's forest? Sato asked with a serious look on his face. His expression left Urza stunned for a while before she came back to her senses. Get off me, she yelled. Urza pulled her arm away from Sato's grip. What the hell is wrong with you? What do you mean by vampire attacks? She voiced out. So you don't know about it then? Sato said, looking at the groove for a while before he turned his back on Urza again. Sorry for the way I held you. Sato apologized, getting ready to leap back up to the cliff so he could find the cats. Wait, Urza uttered, please wait. She uttered again with her cheeks a bit red in embarrassment. Sato paused, looking at Urza who had her eyes swaying around as she rubbed her arm as if shy of what she was about to say. She kept looking at Sato and the ground until she finally had the courage to tell out what she wanted to say. I don't know my way around here, please take me back to Tamrin. Urza yelled. Hey, Sato gave out a weird expression. I know it's too much to ask after I, kicked me in the face. Why, yeah, that. Sato tilted his head to the side with a puzzled expression as he stared at Urza. Urza grabbed dress, squeezing it tightly as she stared at the ground flustered. Sato laughed. Hey, it's not funny. Urza shouted. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't be laughing, but how hard is it for a lady to ask for help and just apologize? Sato said, with a tear in his eye after laughing so hard. What, you apologized to then, you did look up my skirt. Feeling more flustered, she yelled facing the sky as she tried to hide her face. You're right. Sato walked toward her, he grabbed her hand. I'm sorry, was that okay? He asked. Yeah, I guess so. Great, now step back. All of a sudden, Sato pulled her toward him, as a ball of water began to cover them from his feet up like an egg. Urza was shocked yet again, that was until she heard the howling of multiple wolves charging toward their position. Are those? Urza said, falling on the floor of water from the previous pull. She immediately stood to her feet, looking around to see that she was in a cocoon of water. Where am I? Urza asked as she slowly stood to her feet, looking around to see how beautiful the inside of the water cocoon was. G-boom. The water cocoon began to vibrate like something was smashing against it continuously. Looks like they are after you. Sato said with a smile, hold on. He grabbed Urza on the waist and pulled her close. Urza was flustered as her hands rested on Sato's chest with her face close to his. Shall we? Sato muttered. The cocoon burst open with sharp water waves following right after. All the werewolves moved back to avoid getting killed by the waves. Once the water was down, Sato landed on the ground with his arms still wrapped around Urza's waist. Well, what do we have here? One of the wolves uttered, walking slowly to the left with its eyes fixed on Sato. Who are you and what do you want? Urza asserted. The wolf transformed into a man, wearing a black fury coat with a high hat on his head and a one-eyed high glass. Urza, the daughter of Vlad the Vampire Lord, you've come quite far away from home. The man said with a smirk. Who the hell are you? Urza asked again. Sato just stood there watching as the other wolves tried to surround him without letting them know. Here's an offer, come with me and he doesn't get hurt. The man said. He. What do you mean by, he? Urza voiced out, getting angry at the way the man was staring at her. The man tapped his finger and a dark smoke gushed out from underneath his feet which materialized into Sebastian, Urza's butler. Feeling enraged after seeing her butler badly wounded on the ground, Urza pulled away from Sato and stormed toward the man with her eyes glowing. How dare you? She yelled, the groove erupting in lava as earthquakes began to build up and the sky turned darker. Chapter 39 20 minutes remaining, the shadow wolf poison. The man looked around him to see the earth cracking up and bursting with larvae all around him. Even the other wolves had begun moving away from Sato and Urza since they didn't want to be burnt by the larva. With his finger positioning his glasses, the man uttered, so, you possess the eye too, I see. Give him back to me. Urza voiced out, her hair dancing in the wind as the destruction around her began to intensify. You must have the idea that you have the upper hand here, but here's the thing, the only reason I haven't killed you yet, is because I still need you alive. The man yelled. A huge rush of black smoke showed up behind him and formed into multiple dark-looking shadow wolves that immediately charged at Urza. Urza pointed her finger at them and began shooting out fast-moving icicles, but they proved useless. The wolves turned into smoke and merged back together. Once they had gotten close to Urza, they leapt to the sky in unison. Forming into a huge shadow wolf, it was still in midair and was about to pounce on Urza. Urza fired as many icicles as she could muster but no physical attack was affecting it, this left her in a state of panic. The wolf was about to pounce on Urza when out of nowhere, a huge dark mist covered it up which caused it to fall to the ground right in front of her. The wolf swarmed around, trying to escape the mist. It turned into dust and split it into multiple wolves but it still couldn't escape the dark mist. The dark wolf howled in pain before its whole body began to fade into the mist with no sign of regeneration. After a few minutes of fighting, the wolf was completely devoured by the mist. The dark mist returned to Sato's hand after it had finished with the wolf. As soon as whole dark mist had returned to his hand, Sato closed his fist with his eyes focused on Urza, that was close. Urza and the man had stunned looks on their faces as they looked at Sato who still had a casual look on his face. Did he just destroy all my hounds with a single attack? Who the hell is this guy? The man thought to himself as he stared at Sato. Are you okay? Sato asked Urza before standing beside her. How did you do that? Urza raised a question, lifting Sato's hand and examining it to see where the mist came from. What are you doing? Sato stammered. Be honest with me, what are you? There's no way a mere human to do something like that, Urza said with a serious look on her face. Sato didn't reply, he was still trying to fight the embarrassment he was feeling from the way Urza was holding his hand close to her chest. He could see a clear view of her cleavage and her beautiful face that was pulled close to his. Sato mumbled. He then suddenly sensed something coming from underneath where they stood. Jump! Sato yelled. He grabbed Urza's hand and leapt to the sky only to encounter a vampire that suddenly turned up out of nowhere behind him. The vampire kicked Sato in the arm, which pushed him back and caused him to let go of Urza's hand. She fell to the ground with a shadow wolf charging from the ground and biting her arm. Grunting, Urza placed her other hand on the wolf's head and a bolt of straight lightning fell from the sky and landed on the wolf, causing it to shatter. Once the wolf was gone, Urza fell to the ground, flat on her stomach, and she slowly started falling unconscious. Green glowing streaks started showing on her arm and were slowly spreading to her shoulder. The streaks themselves were beating in accordance with her heartbeat. Sato landed and slid on the ground with his eyes still set on Urza. Less than notice. Urza is in a critical state, heartbeat dangerously decreasing from heart poison, medical treatment needed urgently greater than. Heart poison? Sato asked. Less than a bite from a shadow wolf has a large amount of genio acid that links to the blood streams and weakens the victim's heartbeat greater than. You're telling me she was poisoned? Less than affirmative greater than. Less than victims has 20 minutes till heart completely weakens. Cure is easy to conjure as I have come up with 3 possible remedies to fix this greater than. I see, I let my guard down, that's on me. Sato muttered to himself, standing to her feet to see a vampire standing in front of him and also surrounded by wolves. Less than 18 minutes greater than. Hey traveler, I've seen the power you possess, it's quite impressive, how about you join me, Fiend uttered, placing his giant axe on his shoulder with a smug look on his face. Why are you here? You should be rounding up the cat people, the wolfman said, using his hand to straighten his hat. I guess I have no choice, my mask isn't with, pretty sure the vampire knows my face already. Sato said to himself, watching as Fiend and the werewolf communicated. I was a bit distracted, you see. Fiend replied, a bug ruined the plan and the cats escaped, call it fate but can't be helped. The deal was, we take out the duke's daughter and you gather more pawns, how could you fail such a simple task? The wolf man said, looking down at the vampire. No fret, there's another village just south of here, I believe it belongs to some mermaids, I'll raid that to make up for the failure. Fiend replied with a smirk. Less than 15 minutes greater than. Hey, Sato voiced out, catching the attention of both the vampire and wolf man. They both switched their attention to him as soon as Sato spoke. Does the traveler have something to say? Killing you is still on my list if only you'll be patient. Fiend teased. Sorry boys, but here's the thing, I don't have time to waste, so answer me this, who is behind this little master plan of yours? Sato asked with a foreshadowed expression. The wolfman laughed, you wanna who's behind what plan? Wow, you're stupid, he insulted. Is that a no then? Sato asked silently. Okay, you're getting too cocky. Fiend said, slamming his axe on the groove and walking slowly toward Sato. Sighing, Sato sent a glare at them, causing a wide range of magic energy to whoosh out of his body. The heavy wind blew all around the area, pushing all the wolves and the vampire back. Sato raised his right arm to the sky, and a huge dark flame tornado began to form on his hand with his eyes glowing green. Chapter 40 What are you? Fiend and the rest moved back a bit after seeing the huge black swirling flames that were dancing on Sato's palm. With a grin, Fiend tightened the grip on his axe while staring at the black flames. I knew you were no normal human, you're a monster. He yelled in excitement. You blood-sucking idiot, this is no time to be having fun, he's going to kill us all if we don't make a run for it. The wolfman uttered. He transformed into a wolf and began running alongside the rest of his pack, leaving Urza on the ground weakened and unconscious. Although she was weak, she could still see Sato when she tilted her head a bit to look behind her. She could see a male, with green glowing eyes, standing with a force of black flames whooshing out of his hands into the sky. You, what are you? Urza muttered, resting her head back on the ground while still fighting the pain she was feeling in her left hand. Less than target locked greater than. Perfect, begin, Sato said to himself, striking the swirling flames down on the masses of werewolves and vampires that were in front of him. The flames ripped the earth apart, and every enemy it came in contact with. Fiend tried blocking the flames with this axe, but the force which the dark flames were using to swirl caused Fiend's upper body to rip off from his lower half and die. Urza witnessed everything, watching as the flames tore every wolf apart with its force. For some reason she wasn't affected by it, the flames were just passing right through her with no harm done. But she couldn't help but feel restless, seeing people get ripped to shreds right in front of her. After a few more minutes, the poison in her body started to kick in and she fell unconscious. Flashback. It was a cold and dark night in Vlad's mansion. Vlad and his kid Kristen, who was only 9 years old at the time, were seated outside looking at the night sky. Father, I want to know how to fight, Kristen said with his foot scattering the sand as he wore a gloomy look on. You want to fight? Vlad asked. He hacks an open white-colored robe on and a blue flip-flop. Both he and his son were seated at the passageway where no one would dare to pass since it was Vlad's quiet place. Yes, I want to know how to fight just like you, and do the eye thingy, so I don't get bullied anymore. I want to be just as strong as Damien. Kristen responded with the same sad expression. After hearing what Kristen said, Vlad burst into laughter. Hey, I'm serious here, I really want to be strong, Kristen yelled. Of course you do, and that's a good thing, Vlad said, standing to his feet and placing his hand on Kristen's head. Wanting power is not a bad thing, son, but remember, use your strength to help and give to others, not take away for selfish agendas. That is where your true strength lies. I understand, Kristen replied with a nod. So does that mean you'll teach me how to use the eye? He asked with a smile. I doubt you are able to use the Duke. Vlad, please, your attention is needed, it's the young mistress. A feminine voice yelled from behind the door, panting as if she had been running for hours. Vlad and Kristen immediately followed the maid to Urza's room. Multiple maids gathered in front of her room, fear written all over their faces as they looked inside. What's going on here? Vlad asked. As soon as they heard Vlad's voice, all the maids moved away from the entrance to create a path for him to pass. Not wasting any time, Vlad and his son walked into the room, and what they saw left them completely frozen in shock. Vlad immediately covered Kristen's eyes with his right hand so he wouldn't catch sight of the horror that was in the room. Two maids were lying dead on the ground, with their heads blown off from the shoulder and their guts ripped open with their insides scattered on the floor. I see, so this was your doing, Vlad said, looking to the right to see small Urza tucked in the corner. She was shaking in fear with tears dropping from her red glowing eyes as she stared at the gore that was in front of her. Her white dress was soaked in blood and her face had the same pattern, but no one could dismiss the face of trauma that was written on her face. Vlad shut his eyes and took a deep breath. Bomb. He immediately opened his eyes back, this time it was glowing red with the symbol of a ram. He gazed at Urza for a while before she fell unconscious in the pool of blood, with tears still lingering around her eyes. ... End of flashback. Urza slowly opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was the wooden ceiling that was embellished with different colors of lamps. What happened? She muttered to herself. Ah, I see you're awake. Hearing his voice, Urza slowly turned to see Sato, with his head resting on his arms while he stared at her with a smile. As soon as she spotted him, Urza jolted up from the bed and wanted to grab hold of Sato's neck only to have a sword aimed at her from the back. Please control yourself, Elena said, standing behind Urza on the bed with her short blade. Urza's fingers were almost close to Sato's neck, but he didn't show any sign of fear. Where am I? Urza asked in a cold tone. That's a funny way to thank your helper, Sato uttered. He stood to his feet and walked over to the small desk at the side of the room. The room wasn't that big, it had only one bed and a couple of pieces of equipment resting at the corners. Urza remembered when Sato destroyed all the wolves that were after her. It was you. You were the one that killed them, she said. Sato paused with his back still turned. What are you? You killed them all with just one attack, Urza muttered. I've never seen anything like it. Sato didn't look back, he was still paused and didn't utter a word. Less than notice, heart rate is increasing exponentially, this is a sign of fear or anxiety, greater than.